Folks, allow me to introduce Tanya Hewitt. Tanya Hewitt is a PhD, has a PhD, spent 18 years in the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, and is known for her dynamic presentations. She's a lifelong learner, and has benefited from immense availability of wonderful content throughout this pandemic. Now, I'm assuming it's not the COVID itself, but having that hyper connection with folks. She's going to talk about culture and in the business place, and it's really an important thing. This is where it's kind of the heart and soul of the business. I'm going to stop now because actually this is Tanya's thunder, and let her give you the thunder. Over to you, Tanya.
So, well, thanks a lot, Bernie. And let me just get this started here. So thanks everyone for coming. Can everybody see this screen that says Beyond Safety Compliance, the big beyond, as opposed to what I have behind me? I have to make sure I get that fixed so that the beyond is the main concept we're talking about here in Beyond Safety Compliance. So this is a brief outline of what I'd like to cover today. I'd like to address the problem that I'm talking about. Then I'd like to give a little bit of a perspective taking through one model. Then I'd like to look at some companies, and then I just give you a brief glimpse at the domains that I'm pulling from, spend a little bit of time on human and organizational performance, and then we'll walk through why are you here, and then we'll go through some takeaways. Okay, so before I go farther, I'd like to bring you back to last week. So I'm just going to play a little bit of this video.
So yes, as Bernie described, I am a recovering CPA and former partner from an accounting firm. And I was there for 20 years. I climbed that proverbial corporate ladder. I had accomplished my dream. I was doing what I went to school for. But my last year that I was there, I wasn't feeling fulfilled. My mental health was declining. I was suffering from burnout, depression, anxiety. And I just chalked it all up to, you know what, life sucks, work sucks, shove it under the carpet, push on, look forward to, the holidays that are coming, look forward to the weekend that is coming, I'll be happy when the next thing comes along. And that next thing just never came. And so I ignored all those, small signs that my mind, body, and spirit were giving me on that I needed to be more proactive in my life and look after my physical and mental health. But I didn't listen to them. And then I couldn't ignore the very last sign, which was me having a complete nervous breakdown and severe panic attack in my office one day. And so I took a leave of absence from my work. I had every intention of going back because that was my career. I took a leave of absence from my work, and I gave myself permission to look after myself, to be selfish and look after me for once. We're always so great in looking after everybody else, and we always put ourselves last. And that is the very first time that I set foot in the yoga studio was November 2017. I made a conscious effort to align myself with more positive people, more holistic people. The yoga studio was my happy place. I was going every day, twice a day. And it wasn't the physical exercise that I resonated with because I've always been an athletic person, but it was the energy that I felt from everybody in the room. It was the spiritual connection, and that felt really, really good. So the more I aligned myself with happy people, positive people, spiritual people, and also made a conscious effort to keep at arm's length negative and toxic people in my life, which unfortunately also meant family members, I was starting to feel really good about myself. I was finding a me that I loved again. And then I thought, God, can I go back to my firm for another 20 years until retirement? And I thought there was no way I can go back for even one more year, let alone 20 more years.
Okay, so what did we learn from Janiki's story there? Cut it out. What do we get from that?
She was tired.
She was tired.
She's run the race, and she doesn't have the passion's not there for what she's doing.
Right.
The culture at her firm wasn't supporting the mental health of its employees.
That's an excellent observation. Absolutely.
Is working through emotional abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
she didn't feel safe.
She didn't feel safe, that's for sure.
People weren't watching to see what was happening. The company.
Yeah, you all are coming up with really good things. I guess I'm a lot more superficial than you guys are.
She did an amazing, she took amazing steps by she had the awareness through a dark time that it wasn't healthy for her to be where she was in the world of work, and did something about it. That's a tough thing to do when you're in a dark place with yourself, to actually think things through with great clarity, because she was primed to go back based on just the dark place that she was in, by making not the best decision for herself. Thankfully, she was, through all the darkness, she found the light and was able to be aware of her own, as Mike said, her own safety, and chose not to go back. So I really think it's cool that she made the decision or found the clarity while being in a place of darkness. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think she showed on. She truly expressed her feelings. Sometimes we're hesitant about expressing anything negative. People might have a gilded opinion of us, but there she was exposing herself. So she was honest with herself, and she knew what she needed to do.
Absolutely. You guys rock this. This is great. So in my superficial little analysis here, I had said that, she had come up at the beginning with the conclusion that, you know what, work just sucks. Like, that's just the way it is. And it's, you just push on, and you just decide that vacations, weekends, are what you value now. And that work is just the necessary drudgery, and you'll get your fulfillment out of non-work activities. So, but then she had a crisis that forced her to rethink that narrative, because that narrative is really pervasive, as you guys were talking about, and she is the exception, to actually get to a healthier place. Pat Lencioni had said on a recent podcast that quitting and staying is a horrible thing, and yet it's endemic. There's not just COVID that we're fighting out there, everyone. Like, there is a huge issue here in a lot of the way our workplaces function. LinkedIn is just wonderful. So I know who Edwards Deming is. I've known for years, but I saw a post on LinkedIn just last week, on Saturday, I guess, that made me rethink, what I wanted to say. So Edward Deming was born in 1900. He was schooled in the US in mathematical physics, and he basically pioneered statistical process control. And he is American, always was. He had a way to improve quality to a lot of companies, and he tried to sell it to post-war American companies. But post-war American companies were far more interested in mass production and just doing periodic inspection of things and having top-down management. And he felt shut out. So he went to Japan. So Japan in the 50s had crappy products. By the time the 70s and 80s came around, Japan was what we were buying in North America and in Western Europe, because of a lot of it because of this guy. In 1980, and you can see this on YouTube. Isn't YouTube amazing? We can see all of this stuff. NBC aired a white paper. You know, basically they said, if they can do it there, talking about the Japanese, why can't we do it here? So Deming came back to the US in his 80s. He had recorded a bunch of videos to a bunch of corporate, you know, people. They're all on YouTube. This is how I know. And he has one called The 5 Deadly Diseases. This is from 1984, okay? There's the YouTube link, so you can see it yourself. But in here, he talks about the lack of constancy or purpose, no planning for the future, kind of like a global pandemic maybe, but lack of long-term definition and goals. Emphasis on short-term profits, worship of the quarterly dividend, sacrificing long-term growth of the company. Annual rating of performance, which is arbitrary and unjust, demoralizing to employees, nourishes short-term performance. Notice that these things feed off each other, right? This is a race to the bottom in this kind of thing. Annihilates teamwork and encourages fear. Mobility of management, where you have no loyalty, no roots in the company, no knowledge of the company, and no understanding of its problems, and the use of visible figures only. No use of figures that are unknown and unknowable and encouraged by business schools. This was 37 years ago. And I swear to God that a lot of the people that I follow now are singing from this songbook that Deming was singing from in the 50s, for Christ's sake. Like, you know, what the hell? We're not learning. But this is the backdrop that is the problem that I'm talking about. Okay. This is the law of thirds. I wasn't in love with this model, but it's grown on me since. Basically, you can get people into 3 buckets. One bucket are the people who you want to be around, the people who are the early adopters, the Janickies out there, the people who do the right thing. So they're on the right-hand side. On the polar opposite, on the left-hand side, are not like that. They are chronically negative. We're not confusing this with people who are raising bad news in order to get improvement. These are just chronically negative, never anything good to say, just, bitching all the time. And then in the middle, we have the amorphous middle, which is just kind of, a mix, I guess, of the other two. A lot of companies tend to focus on the left-hand side, because if only we could convince these people, then we'd be able to get somewhere. But the problem with that is that a lot of the amorphous middle realizes, well, if that's how you get attention here, then I guess I'll join that crowd. But what's worse is that the people you value, the good people, tend to bifurcate, and some of them leave. And in fact, if you are depending on employee engagement surveys as the only method to interrogate the workforce, you risk doing exactly this. Where I came from, there was a negative employee engagement survey, shocked the management. 4 people in my division left in 6 months. So that's what this looks like. But if you change your perspective and you focus on the good people, the opposite happens, because you will get that amorphous middle to start to realize, well, maybe this is how you get attention. And the negative people bifurcate, and some of them leave. So this is a really interesting way to look at things. So I'm just going to present to you some companies, but I just like to caveat that what I'm about to share is from the conversation I had with the individual. So I didn't look at the entire company. I didn't talk to the employees. So I'm basing this off of a conversation that I had with the person that I'm going to be presenting here. So I'm just going to start with my website. This is above the fold on my website. And I know I have to change it because I've been told by too many people that everything is so cryptic. Everything is cryptic. And embrace the red and challenge the green is not well understood, except by some of the people who might not have heard that phrase, but know it implicitly. And I'm just going to walk you through that now. Svetlana Renikova is just a wonderful woman. She's Russian, and she had a career in import and export. Now, in her retirement career, she is devoted to helping immigrant women. Her main goal is to bring happiness and fulfillment to people, recognizing that she can't help everyone, and she would like to help people become themselves. She has a lot of fun helping others. She believes that everyone deserves a second and possibly a third chance. She attributes her outlook to her upbringing. She's extraordinarily humble and spoke of the many influences in her life, allowing her to become the person she is. She spoke of the gift of the millennial generation, who are very, very driven to make the world a better place. And her husband has a business to help align work, like specific tasks, with the World Health Organization's Sustainable Development Goals. So if you finish a project, you could help, with water, water conservation in some part of the world that needs it. So unlike the other two people that I'm going to be talking about, I did get a lot of people's opinions of Svetlana because I attended her International Women's Day celebration. She is adored by a ton of people. Lisa Oliveira. Okay, she works in the trucking industry, okay? So the trucking industry doesn't have a whole lot of notoriety in having great company cultures. It's been an essential service during this whole pandemic. When she started off as a trucker, and she moved from driving to the office years ago. And when management changed, well, before management changed, she asked, why are we all white here? And the owner said, well, just because. And she didn't like that. And today the company is multicultural because she didn't like that answer. Drivers and dispatchers are typically on opposite sides of a fence. Their relationship is filled with friction. She's talked to people that you have to treat each other with human decency. She basically got the dispatchers in the office and the truckers in the field to have meaningful conversations in addition to timing and product and all this kind of thing. She got them to start to talk like people. They work together as a team to get things done. She has the drivers helping one another. If they see somebody in their fleet with a flat tire, they are obliged to pull over and help with that flat tire. They are now all brothers and sisters. There is a profound loyalty that she described. Nobody quits this company. Like they love working for her. They love being with their brethren. She screens new drivers on their driving record, on their CVOR, and I asked her for this, anything else, on the fit with the company. If they're not a good fit, she doesn't take them on. She spends time in order to figure out if they're going to be a good fit. I asked her to describe her response to an incident, and she recalled one. Talked of, the typical vulture companies, the tow truck drivers and things like this. She asked them, would you be able to help, not seeing them as vultures, but as necessary partners in being able to, help with a situation. She talked about it was not the driver's fault. The driver, I trust my drivers. I wouldn't, the driver, she understood the whole thing. The driver did exactly what he was supposed to do. And it was just fantastic. However, She did talk about if she has to find an infraction, if somebody is hiding something from her, this is question the green, there will be consequences. If people come to her with their own infractions, there are no consequences. This is embracing the red. She knows it implicitly without having to listen to podcasts like everybody else. She talked about never lying, never sugarcoating. She never wants drivers to feel as though they're on their own. There is a community of support behind you always. And of course, this is replicated in their personal lives. You know, they are very, very supportive of each other. If there's death in the family, if there's a new member of the family born, all this kind of thing, massive baskets all over the place. You know, some people will fill their trucks in order to be able to help deliver goods and stuff. Like, it's amazing, amazing stuff. And this is in Ontario. Godzinger, this guy is in the construction industry. This is even possibly worse than trucking in terms of culture and stuff. Another essential service he's been working throughout this pandemic. He does warehouses and manufacturing. He does not do hospitals. He won't do these specialized kinds of things. He talked about design build as a mindset that is not part of the typical build construction industry mindset. He talked about working with people to find mutually beneficial solutions, probably way early in the process. And having been burned a couple of times, working with people who had different agendas, and so he doesn't work with them anymore. He talked about a whole team approach, designers, project managers, HR, safety, carpentry, laborers, to get a certain job done. They're all on the same team and they all know what the goal is. He spoke of carpenters knowing their job. Like, he's just the office guy. He even said, well, I just answer phones. And okay, let's get a little bit more out of this than just answering phones. He's, you know, he trusts his workers to do their job. The team is more than just co-workers. He explained lots of personal camaraderie amongst and between field and office staff. They work with a preferred supplier. They do not engage in the general tender approach. They do not participate in the race to the bottom. They have many repeat clients. He explained to me, well, look, we're locally focused. There are neighbors. We could run into them at the grocery store. Our kids could be on the same soccer field. If I shortchange them, this is not going to work. So I mean, he respects his customers. He doesn't take on customers who are not going to be in that kind of relationship. He has a long-term understanding of the company's role. It's a very reputation-guided company. He also prioritizes fit in hiring and in customer selection. In construction, it is often that you have this RFI, this request for information, where everybody just stops because there's something we don't understand. So we have to wait for the paperwork to go up and tell us what to do. And people, you can see this, people on a construction site not doing anything. He says, bullshit. That's not how this works. If there's a problem, I want to know about it right now. I want to embrace the red. And I don't ever want you guys to feel as though you have to wait in order to be able to get stuff done. So, like, what do these companies share? They know who they are and they know who they are not. Most importantly, the customer is not always right in this field. They emphasize relationships, both internal and external. The fit is critical in this kind of stuff. All of them, like, I asked their permission to use them. I mean, even when I was talking to them, I said, oh my God, you guys are fantastic. And they said, no, we're not. No, we're not. I mean, this is just who we are. This is how we do our work. And I said, no, I don't think you understand. This is fantastic stuff that you're telling me. And they said, well, I don't think so. I mean, this is just normal stuff. They are profoundly humble. The people who get this stuff are not doing it to be on the mountaintop to say, look at me, I am the best out there. They're not in it for that. Okay, so the domains. Organizational health is like a lot of what I've talked about. And he has a podcast, and I'll just read to you how he starts off every podcast. Welcome to an episode of At the Table with Patrick Lencioni, where everything we talk about is related to changing the world of work so that more organizations can be more effective and less dysfunctional, and employees can be more fulfilled and less miserable. So I'm a member of his Kappa Pro team, but I'm not going to be spending much time on this. We kind of touched on a lot of it already, but I'm not going to talk about organizational health specifically. I will talk about human and organizational performance. So Jeff Dalto, God love him, made this this publication. I'm very honored to be counted amongst some of these contributors, because some of these people I've been following for years, and a lot more I've met during this pandemic. So I'm just going to say a couple of words. Love, friendship, health, democracy, justice. I suspect when I said these words, you conjured up something of some understanding of what each word means to you. And I further bet that if we were to share our own definitions of these words, they would all be different, because these are elusive, emergent concepts that resist a clear, crisp definition. Safety is this kind of word. What one person would define as hard hats and steel-toed boots, another person would define as human relationships in the workplace, and others would define as having a systems view. Others would say it's insatiable curiosity, and still others would define as business excellence. You can see how Jeff Dalto had struggled with the title here. He has, all sorts of words underneath his title, because there's all sorts of variety in this kind of thing. So this is one of my sandboxes from which I pull, and I claim that this can help reduce the us-them gap that is so pervasive in organizations today. All right. So I'm going to introduce the blunt end and sharp ends to you. So this we get from James Reason from the early 90s. So at the blunt end, we have, above that, we'd have these international organizations, the, International Labor Organization, World Health Organization, things like that. So at the top of this, you have government and regulators at the blunt end. As you work towards the sharp end, you have boards and CEOs, managers at all levels, and then you have front end workers. And you can see that authority and power go from the blunt end to the sharp end, but responsibility and influence go the opposite way. And having authority and responsibility on different directions like this is a big part of this new view of safety, trying to get this corrected, because it's not helpful to have them separated like this. I have a puddle shown in the top right of this slide. If you're on the blunt end, you are almost always at the center of that puddle. You can affect ripples going out by your actions, by your communications, by, also messaging. And you're always going to have an effect of having concentric circles emanate from that. And the front end is always at the edge of one of these concentric circles, feeling the effects of the lapping circles, be it communication, be it actions, be it whatever. The blunt end affects the whole system. Impact at the sharp end. So these I pulled from a website that no longer exists, but they're gorgeous. And this is where Richard Cook was talking about how people make safety at the sharp end. As Sidney Decker talked about, workers complete the design, always, because they are negotiating goal conflicts all the time. And most of the time it works. Most of the time, this constant trade-off that they're doing needs to be done. Performance variability is the core of normal work. Performance variability, we're talking about things like sine waves, Performance variability is the core of normal work, always, because of all of these efficiency thoroughness trade-offs. You're constantly having to negotiate these things at the front end. And most of the time things work, and this is invisible. This is the law of fluency. We don't even know how complex it is because the actors hide all of this complexity from us. The more expert they are, the less able they are even to explicate it because it becomes tacit to the way they do things. All sorts of this stuff is part of normal work, but we never talk about it. We will talk about it when there's failure, but most of the time there is success, and this is going on constantly. We are engaged in efficiency thoroughness trade-offs all the time, where thoroughness is having the time to think. You know, you have situational awareness, you choose and plan. Efficiency is execution, doing things. Having too much of one or the other is catastrophic. If you're being efficient all the time, you're going to miss things. And if you are thorough all the time, you're going to be engaged in analysis paralysis. So you need to have a trade-off fundamentally with efficiency and thoroughness. But in practice, as Hollnagel says here, people take shortcuts they think are necessary to get the job done, to save time. They're doing their goal conflict resolution to save time, to avoid the unnecessary use of resources, etc. And when it goes well, nobody takes any notice, nobody cares. And the shortcuts may even be tacitly encouraged. But when it goes wrong, people are blamed for violating procedures and for being unsafe. Far too often we choose efficiency over thoroughness. This becomes even worse in a group because individual members think to themselves, I can be efficient because other people in the process can be thorough. But if everybody thinks that way, nobody's being thorough, and there's a ginormous elephant in the room getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody's addressing it. And, you know, that's how Boeing happens. That's how, you know, this happens all the time. This is the model that is so critical. So this is charitable. When Hollnagel introduced this, he called it work as imagined versus work as done. So the work as planned is the black line. It is invariant. It is static. These are the laws, the regulations, the job descriptions, the procedures, the job, you know, the job work orders, whatever. They are invariant to the context in which they're introduced. The blue line, though, is work as done. And as I've described, the workers are constantly involved in trade-offs, and performance variability is the basis of normal work. And it comes as this blue sinusoidal-ish curve. And it has to, because that's how work has always been done. We just never looked at it this way before. But this whole movement of safety, this new view of safety, is trying to get as much understanding of that blue line as you possibly can. Bob Edwards, who is the Edwards on Clint Edwards attribution, says we have to learn from the masters of the blue line. They're the ones who know what's actually going on. Stephen Shorrock has a much more elaborate model of this, and I think it has 8 different flavors. So this is just a very condensed model, but I think it's really powerful. We only tend to care when things go wrong. There is so much richness when things go well that we never, ever look at. Normal work is really important. Okay, so let's just finish up with why are you even here? So the 3-stage mature model is getting at why you do things. It's the motive behind why you do things, like once you're done. Why do you do things? It could be because they are requirement driven, you know, because somebody told you to do it, because there are procedures that said so, because there's a law that governs it, yeah, that kind of thing. Formal rules of management, that's why you do it. That's stage 1. Stage 2 is more goal driven. So you have some kind of an objective, you have some kind of a goal that you set, either as an organization or as an individual. Like there's some kind of target that you're reaching in order to be able to, that's why you're doing what you're doing, because to reach that goal. But there's another way to look at it, where you are continually improving, where you are doing what is the right thing to do, where you have values and ethics behind you, a very clear vision for the health of the organization. These are three fundamentally different reasons to motivate you to do what you do. So I've given you the definitions, and if this were a normal survey, how are you being motivated to be on this webinar? Which one is it? You have the definitions, and there you go. Which one of these do you choose? But you can get at it a lot more easily if you take what I call a contextual maturity model, where you put flesh on the bones, so to speak. So you give what requirement driven looks like for that indicator. It's an indicator, okay? It's just an indicator. That's a whole other topic. But anyway, so it's just one little thing. And you flush out what that looks like at these different levels of maturity. So requirement driven is seen as a way to show adherence to continual learning. Time is tracked and accounted for. Or goal driven, an opportunity to expand networks, engaging with platforms that enable future connections. Or continual improvement, full engagement with the material, following the suggested links, and fully participating in the experience. So if you're given that instead of just the boxes, you might have a better idea of what you'd want to pick. You could say things like, I have CEU credits to submit to maintain my license, and it's free. It's great to use these free webinars because I am tracking every minute to submit to the authority. Or you could say, I try to avoid GoToMeeting and Zoom webinars. Zoom meetings allow you to see the participants, and I connect with them all on LinkedIn. And now I'm nearly at 500 connections. Or it could be, I have taken notes, participated through questions in the chat, tracked down and offered resources. I lose so much time because I'm learning, I lose track of time, I'm learning so much. Or you could say, well, I can see all three. I do have CEUs to submit, and I use these webinars to do so. But I'm also increasing my LinkedIn network with nearly every webinar I attend. But this is not at the expense of really digging into the material presented. And I don't really want to check off any one box. I think all three of them apply to me. Or, as like Robert Vopis said, none of this really. Like, I just know Tanya. I wanted to give her moral support. Like, none of that stuff. You got it wrong when you designed the survey. Like, could be totally different. So how on earth do you get any kind of context from this? You just can't. You need context is so critically important to understand. So just some takeaways before I finish up here. So work does not have to be seen as a necessary drudgery with periodic escapes. There are ways to be able to improve workplaces, and we don't have to just satisfy with having work as being the necessary evil that a lot of people believe it to be. Knowing who you are and why you exist are foundational. Humility is essential in this whole enterprise, and context is absolutely critical. You need to be able to get a much richer understanding of what is going on. So those are the reasons, and thank you so very much for coming. I appreciate you being here.